Earlier in this lesson, we showed you a couple of XML-based menu resources. You can see them again here in the menu folder of our res folder for the project. And we talked about the fact that instead of creating the menu items programmatically, as we had done in a couple of prior apps, we were going to programmatically inflate XML menu resources, and those menu resources declaratively specify the menu items. So for example, going back to address book menu.xml, we can see that there's a menu element, and within that menu we have one item element which represents a menu item. And what we'd like is to take this declarative representation of our menu and turn it into an actual menu object with a menu item in it at runtime. And we do that by overriding onCreateOptionsMenu. Now, when we did that in a couple of earlier apps, inside the body of this method, we programmatically created each of the individual menu items that we needed. Here, we have just 2 lines of additional code where we're going to get the menu inflator that's associated with our activity, and then we're going to inflate the appropriate XML-based menu description. So first we declare a local menu inflator called inflator, and we call the inherited method getMenuInflator, which we get indirectly from class activity. Remember, the class that we're looking at right now is a subclass of list activity, which in turn is a subclass of activity. But the key thing is that this getMenuInflator method is going to give us back the menu inflator object that's associated with this activity, so we can then use it to create a menu when the user touches the device's menu button. Or if you're looking at a device that has on-screen buttons to represent the context menu, for example, an Android 3 or higher tablet or an Android 4 or higher tablet or phone, then whenever they touch the actual soft button on the screen, that too would invoke this method to allow us to inflate the menu. Now, once we have our menu inflator object, we're going to invoke its inflate method, and you can see we're providing 2 arguments. The first is the resource ID that corresponds to the XML file that we created. So r.menu says that we're getting a resource from the menu folder, and address book underscore menu is the base name of the XML file that describes the menu resource that we'd like to inflate. And the other piece is the menu object that's passed in as an argument to this method becomes the second argument to the inflate call, and that allows the inflate method to place each of the menu items it creates into the specified menu object. Now, of course, once the menu is displayed on the screen, the user will either select an item from that menu or will dismiss the menu. If they make a selection, then the onOptionsItemSelected method will get called, and in this activity we have only one menu item, so if it did get selected, we don't have to check which menu item was selected, we just need to perform an actual task. And the task we're going to perform in this app, as you saw in the test drive, is when the user touches the Add Contact menu item, we'd like to display the Add Edit Contact activity and allow the user to type in the information for a new contact to save into the database. And the way that we do that is with something called an explicit intent. So we're creating an object of class intent here, and you can see that's in the Android.content package. We create it as a new object of class intent with 2 arguments. The context in which this intent will be executed, addressbook.this is the current activity we're working on, and the second argument is the .class representation of the activity that you want to launch. So add edit contact .class is actually a Java program shortcut for the add edit contacts class definition, if you will, and then that will be used to load up the add edit contact activity and start it executing. And when that happens, we will then display automatically the add edit contact activity. And the way that we do that is by taking the intent that we just created and passing it to the indirectly inherited method start activity, which is part of the activity class, and we give it as its argument the intent that we'd like to execute, And when you execute an intent, if there is only one activity that can respond to such an intent, then that particular activity will just start executing. But as you'll see in some of our other apps, if you have an intent that can potentially be handled by multiple different activities, you can have an activity chooser, as it's called, get displayed and allow the user to select an appropriate activity to perform the task. In this particular example, we don't have a need for that because it's all self-contained within this one app, where the address book activity is going to start the add edit contact activity to allow the user to add a new contact. Now, once we have started the activity, the last thing we do here in onOptionsItemSelected is return super.onOptionsItemSelected, because again, anytime you override one of these activity methods, you're supposed to also invoke the superclass version of the method, and if you don't, you actually wind up getting errors from the Android system.